Martha?
Yeah, Eric, for more on this, let's bring in our political panel. Jessica Tarloff is the Senior Director of Research for Bustle.com, a Fox News contributor and author of the book America in the Age of Trump. Chris Wilson is a GOP pollster, former pollster for Ted Cruz campaign, and the CEO of WPA Intelligence. Good to have both of you. So,
thanks, Arthur.
Yay, we're talking about the Dems in Vegas. Specifically, though, we're going to talk about Vice President Biden. Jessica, I'm going to start with you because a whopping $6.3 million dollar haul is first inside the first 24 hours of his official announcement. What does this say about Vice President Biden's chances to compete, Jessica, with the president? And what does it say about Democratic voters?
It says that Democratic voters like Joe Biden, and that the Twitter sphere and the punditry class that we are a member of were perhaps too hasty in saying that Joe Biden is an absolute disaster and that we've seen this dance before. This is only, of course, 24 hours, but I had a huge sense, breathed a huge sigh of relief, I should say, when I saw those numbers come in. He was ahead of Bernie Sanders, ahead of what Beto O'Rourke pulled in the first 24 hours. He had a lot of online donations, and then obviously, as a reporter mentioned, went on to bring in $700,000 from that fundraiser in Philadelphia. I think what it signals, though, about the Democratic voter base is that they are much more pragmatic than people are making them out to be. There was a lot of narratives about you can't take corporate money, right? You have to be like Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders. It has to all be done on the grassroots level. Democrats want to elect someone who can beat Donald Trump.
All right. And Chris, one of the things that former Vice President Biden raised immediately out the gate is President Trump's comments after the Charlottesville, Virginia protest, during which, as you well know, Heather Heyer was killed. So, Chris, how does President Trump definitively lay to rest criticisms of what appears to be a license for white supremacy to exist and thrive in our modern day society?
Wow. Well, I'm not sure that that's even. I think that was a little bit of a spin by Biden to try and pump up his fundraising numbers. He was trying to do more to bring in those online numbers. And as Jessica mentioned, he did do a good job with those first day numbers. But I mean, for the woke Democratic Party, you have to point out that their top three fundraisers were all white males: Beto O'Rourke, Bernie Sanders, and now Joe Biden. I think the interesting thing about Biden, though, specifically, is it's sort of like a Dickens novel. It's the best of times, the worst of times. The best of times were he did have a large fundraising day, 24 hours, and he's leading the polls. But from the worst of times this is a former vice president. He really should have done more than that. He had plenty of time to lead up to it. And the fact is, it were larger donations. And so those aren't people like Sanders and O'Rourke. They have a lot of small donors that made up their large pools, whereas Biden was a lot of max outs. He can't keep going back to those people. And the other aspect of it is, Charlottesville aside, he then went on and sort of started up the patented Biden gaffe machine and made the comment that the Obama campaign had no scandals. And so now we spent the last 24 hours discussing and reminiscing about all the Obama administration scandals. And I think that's what we really have to look forward to with Joe Biden, is he is so gaffe prone that he just steps on himself. He has a good day and he turns it right into a bad day by doing something silly like that.
Some would argue the president is that same way, so that'll be a kind of match made in heaven in that regard. But you get your point, though. But back to you, Jessica. Listen, you just heard Chris sort of lay out how the president will come back on Vice President Biden and how the GOP as a whole will do so. Also, though, Jessica, you've got Senators Elizabeth Warren, you've got Bernie Sanders out there criticizing Vice President Biden's backing from corporate donors. I mean, will this turn off potential Biden voters?
I'm not sure that it will. I think that Vice President Biden, maybe future President Biden, fully occupies the center lane there. Amy Klobuchar is the only other candidate that was really in that space, with Sherrod Brown saying that he's not going to be running. As I made the point a couple minutes ago, I think that people are underestimating how pragmatic Democrats are about this. And if you look at the polls, and he's been in the front there since we started tracking this, we'll see in the next couple of days if he can maintain that. And there have been a number of people who have entered into the race, including Mayor Pete, Beto O'Rourke, people who have garnered a ton of excitement, and it still hasn't really chipped away at his front-runner status there. So I think that's really what you have to be paying attention to. And Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders can criticize him all that they want. But if he maintains that lead and that union support and the support from the African-American community, he's going to be very hard to beat in the primary.
So to that point, I want to point out some numbers, Jessica, and then I want Chris to respond to this. So you've had almost 97,000 people donated online to Biden for president, with donations less than $200, with an average donation of $41, and 65,000 of those donors just signed on to the Biden for president email list. So it's a strong signal of a grassroots campaign. Still, President Trump is the man to beat. So, Chris, to you, will the president stay on message about his strong economy so that he can expand beyond his, 38% base?
Well, I'm not going to try to address whether the president's going to stay on message. That's like me trying to do a Pythagorean theorem. It's just not. That's outside of my realm of expertise. I will say, though, those numbers, even though they sound large, I agree with everything that Jessica said. I mean, where Biden is right now, he leads him. He starts in a very strong position. But it really feels to me a lot like 4 years ago where Jeb Bush started in a really strong position. He had a strong fundraising, strong announcement, led in all the polls, and then somebody came down some escalators in New York City, and the whole race got shook up. And I just can't help but wonder if there isn't still some, I think we probably see the field get as large as it's going to get, but is there some way or somebody or some event that shakes things up? Just to be candid, 65,000 donors coming on after the former vice president, 8 years in office under President Obama, is not a very strong showing. And I could give you example after example, but you just can look at O'Rourke's fundraising base and Sanders' fundraising base and see how it pales in comparison to where Biden is right now. And that's why I'm underwhelmed by those first day numbers, because sitting as a 8-year sitting vice president in this realm with Act Blue behind him, he should have had a better experience than what he did in terms of fundraising. It's still impressive, but it should have been far more. And then he also, the way in which he launched his campaign is like, I almost feel like we're stuck in the 80s right now. We have Joe Biden running for president, we have Donald Trump and Oliver North and everybody else who's like the focus of TV, right? And that's where he's running his campaign. His announcement was fumbled. He's doing YouTube clips on Twitter. I mean, the whole way he's
but
done,
you know, a
he's
lot of young people are on
really,
social media.
No, they are, and they should. That's why I guess maybe I'm probably getting a little bit too inside baseball here, but you don't launch on Twitter by putting up a YouTube link. What you do is you launch on Twitter by using the Twitter platform. And the way that just was such a fumble, and it speaks to somebody who is, it kind of points out his age, I think, in the fact that he's out of touch right now with the current Democratic Party.
Jessica, that's a talking point. I mean, listen, President Trump, they're 4 years apart. 4 years apart. They're both older white men, and very powerful, each of them.
Absolutely.
Jessica, final word.
This has always been the strangeness, I guess, of what's going on here, that the two older white men have been in the lead consistently, followed by another white guy. When we have such a focus on diversity in our party, elevating women and people of color to positions of power, we saw that in the 2018
But what's
midterms.
your point, Jessica? I got to wrap.
My point is that people might be looking at this and saying, who do we think is electable against Donald Trump? And polls have shown that a lot of people think that that is a white candidate and that we'll have trouble electing a woman or a person of color.
Well, we have to leave it there. More to talk about in the next 19 months. Jessica Jarloff and Chris Wilson, thanks to you both.
Thanks, Arthel.
You bet. Thank you.